Hey everyone, it's actually Jeb Bush, and today is yet another episode of Inside Jeb. And today I am highly honored to have the amazing Austin Kent with me to talk about Top Shot. Thank you so much for joining me, Austin. I really, really appreciate it.
No, of course. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
All right, so right off the bat, just for anyone who maybe this is their first time seeing you for some reason, which would surprise me because you've been everywhere lately. um, what is your official job title, and what do you do on your day to day for NBA Top Shot?
So my official job title is the content lead of NBA Top Shot. So I'm a Dapper employee, and I've got a great sort of day-to-day gig. I get to be heavily involved with the curation of the moments, everything from like working directly with the NBA to source the plays that end up being in the moments to picking which moments like we go with and working with our community on whether it's Twitter or Discord or wherever to really make sure that the sort of the product we're putting out from an NBA perspective, it passes the NBA fan sniff test. And it's also like in line with what the community wants, like, because I think, that the product is for the community. So I just try to be as open to being as receptive to all those influences coming from the community. So there's a lot of kind of not so exciting aspects of the job, which just involves kind of sourcing the footage and data entry and stuff like that, that I'm happy to do. But the funnest part is just watching highlights and highlights and highlights game after game. A lot of watching hoops, which I've done my whole life, so I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, I've definitely gone down some YouTube highlight rabbit holes on my own time. So I would imagine getting paid to do that, or at least that being part of your job description, is a pretty cool perk, like one of the pros for sure. So you had mentioned that like you do a lot of like you're very aware of the Top Shot community and making sure that the moments like are really authentic and really represent like the NBA and kind of the story that's told each season. Has there ever, I know you haven't been working for Top Shot for too long, but has there ever been a moment that maybe you kind of overlooked at first and there was such an outcry from the community, or so many people from the community brought to your attention that you're like, you know what, I'll give this like a second chance, and you kind of came around to it?
I struggle to come up with a specific example of one, but there's time and time again, I'll sort of, lean on the community, whether, blatantly or somewhat ambiguously, to try to get my finger on the pulse of, which players does this fan base kind of, what players resonate the most with this particular fan base? Because I think when you can really sort of dial into, the psyche of like a dedicated like sports fan that is in love with one team, they come with just packed with so much context that no single person like myself, I couldn't have that for all 30 teams. Like I could have that for the teams that are near and dear to my heart. But like if there's somebody that like, lives and breathes like Utah Jazz basketball, like I'm gonna wanna know, like I'm gonna wanna have to basically see which players, because it's not necessarily the players, that produce the most, that resonate the most. So whether for different parts of our product that's already come out, like in series 2, I've gone to Twitter and be like, hey, like Lakers fans, like which player sort of is like nearer and dearer to your heart? Just trying to always get a feel for that. So when push comes to shove and I have to we have to basically like pick a player to include, and we can't include both of them, I like to make sure that's sort of represented. Yeah, I've done that a couple of times, and even just putting like plays out on Twitter and on Discord and just seeing the kind of reaction. And I love that the NBA Top Shot this hashtag has become as widespread as it is, because that's just a great place to go to see what people care about. And I'm always like impressed like with the obscure plays from like obscure players that get, that hashtag with them. And it just makes me love like the job, because
Yeah.
every sports fan just gets so like ridiculously excited about these very specific things to their team. And it's just, part of the fun for me.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting to see, like, even beyond that, the players that, like, permeate beyond just their team. Like, a good example early on is Gary Payton II. I think every NBA fan is rooting for him just because,
Yeah.
like, he's had, like, a bit of a struggle, and all of a sudden, he's, like, finally blossoming into a player. He's, like, Gary Payton's son, who, like, a lot of people have a certain affinity for already, and then, like, just some of his posters have just been just disgusting. Like, and
Yeah.
it's hard to not get excited about that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one that I was just, like grinning like ear to ear watching people get excited about that dunk on poor Oubre there. But yeah, I love those stories, and that's I get so excited about for like Dapper is a tech company doing really cool, great, revolutionary things in the blockchain space, but
Mhm.
but NBA Top Shot is a very NBA centric like little like part of that I'm just so excited to be able to make sure that we're just improving and optimizing every aspect of how Top Shot like interacts with sports fans on a day-to-day basis. So to be able to really kind of incorporate those shared moments, like you said, across teams,
Mhm.
and actually kind of like get them into the product at a real time pace. We're not completely real time yet, but it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I was this so this is the first I joined Top Shot like most people in like late February, early March. So this is the first like beginning of a season that I've had, and it's been really cool to see like the moments I see on Twitter and the moments I see while watching the games popping up in moments like pretty quickly. Like the new batch that's coming out on Friday, that Blake Griffin moment was all over Twitter because it's like he like was going to pass and change his mind like mid-air, and you could see it on his face. And I mean, you did such a great job capturing that, which like was great. And I mean, going back to Gary Payton too, like you got the dunk right. The thumbnail is like just disrespectful. Like I love it. Like it is really, really cool to like really see that happen full time. Do you think as you guys are still like obviously honing this process and getting it more and more like streamlined, do you think there will be a point where like you guys are I think we'll reach a point like how Candy has done like the play of the day, like I'm assuming Top Shot will be doing something like that sooner or rather or later. Uh,
Yeah, it's something obviously that's like super appealing, and I feel like we're constantly trying to like build closer and closer to that, and even being able to experiment with that sort of thing in summer league was a lot of fun, because we got our first real taste of like, okay, what kind of like resources are going to be required to be able to pull this off.
yeah.
And I like the fact now that like we know we can do it, and we can sort
Mhm.
of maybe plan ahead, like, oh, this something like that could work on this day or that day.
Yeah.
It is nice. And just to be able to kind of have the Top Shot sort of product releases really line up as like chronologically with the season, as we're as fans experiencing the season, I think adds a whole new element of emotional attachment. And
100%.
the tighter and tighter we can make that window, from the day you're going crazy about a play on Twitter to, oh, that's going to be in the next drop. Like, I think just the more we can really tap into the emotional component of people just losing their minds on NBA Twitter, and it's just such a fun like central part of being a fan today.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one thing that's actually really interesting. So I was lucky enough to go on the Milwaukee trip, and I took my dad. My dad's someone who when I made a Top Shot account soon after, I made one for my dad, and I was like, Dad, like I know you don't get this, but like just trust me with this. Like just line up for these packs. Like I'll open them for you if you don't want them, but I know you're going to like want this. And like the Milwaukee trip completely changed his mind. Like my dad is like the biggest Top Shot fan ever now. And one of the things that really stuck with him was just the fact that the idea of reliving the moment, as opposed to, because he was someone who grew up collecting basketball and baseball cards, and he did it with us as kids. Like when we were really young, we still have tons of baseball cards and stuff, and it was something that we all loved. But this adds this next level of like connection to it, because it's so easy to like have that, like you said, that emotion rekindled, because there's so much context, not just of the actual moment in the NBA world, but for you personally, like remembering where you were, or like how you were watching or celebrating something like this happening.
Right.
And I think, so one thing that I, shout out to Top Shot Talk. You jumped on his live stream yesterday. And one of the things that he had mentioned, I kind of want to expound upon a bit, is he had asked about the whole sound of the moment. Like, why isn't there any sound? Like, you guys have music over it, which, I mean, that's cool. But one of like the integral parts of the emotion that moment carries, and adding more context, is the sound of the game. And I understand like maybe getting the announcers is a little tough, but I'm curious as to why like the in-game sound isn't something that's there. I'm assuming it's something you guys are exploring, but yeah, any like insight to that would be great.
Yeah, it's definitely something that like we sort of share the community's enthusiasm for, because I agree, like, and sort of both examples of what you said are just totally true. Like famous, iconic, like play calls, I mean, it can just add so much to the nostalgia factor of plays that we remember watching.
I need a boom, there goes the dynamite, like
to the man. Yeah. Oh yeah, love it. It's huge. So yeah, I think everybody, even internally, we're like, yeah, that would actually be pretty awesome. And I think like in stadium sounds, like I could just listen to in stadium sounds. Sometimes like playing 2K, I would turn the commentators down just so I could hear like the sneakers squeaking and like the sound of the dunks and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree. Like they would add a big part to the moment, and it's something that like is on our radar. But I think there's like hurdles that you mentioned, the licensing hurdles. Like I couldn't even give you the specifics on that, but it would just be like a negligible lift to do that. And I think even from an engineering side, and potentially even from like a sourcing side, like I'm not sure that those like really like those pipelines have really been sort of refined and nailed down, like what that would look like. So it would be cool to explore it, and I think there's interest to explore it. But like we're just so busy trying to work on other parts of the product.
Yeah, you guys got a lot going on.
But definitely, no, I agree. Like I'm a big fan of that concept.
So is it if you don't know this, just it's totally fine. We can even cut it. But like, is it because like the stadium sound is coming through the same announcer's mic, so it's like all the sounds on one track, as opposed to like a separate track of stadium sound and a separate track of like the announcer's like commentary?
Yeah, like I think they've got mics all over the place, and sometimes when we get that, like every now and then we'll get sort of raw footage that does have the stadium sound. Half the time it's just like silent. Half the time, it's just,
okay.
There's because we've never like had a system in place where we need consistent sound. Like we don't get consistent sound.
Interesting.
However, like just from where I stand, like as I watched this sort of footage coming to our system, I can be like, oh, this is one you can hear, half of them you can't hear. But like even I think it was the Jalen Green dunk. That's the one that I was talking about on Twitter, and that's the one that they brought up yesterday.
Weird dunk sounds or whatever. I saw that tweet.
Yeah. Like it's such a fun part, and I was watching the sort of source footage that didn't have the play-by-play. It was just the court sounds, and like don't quote me on this, but like I think they've got like mics like on each backboard or at least on each net. So as like the play moves from one end of the court, you can kind of hear the squeaks, and then they kind of get a bit quieter as they're like crossing like half court and they're farthest from the mics. But then it picks up as they go down the other end, and that dunk was just incredible. So yeah, I don't know that what that would entail like completely from a like a logistics side of things, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be like flipping on a switch, it wouldn't be like getting a signature and then flipping on a switch. I think there'd be some we'd be putting the engineers to work on our end and probably on the NBA's end as well.
Yeah, if the clips are coming sometimes without sound, you'd have to establish a whole different type of like file sharing where like here's the sound accompanied with this clip
Right.
and all that, and they might not. The NBA might not even have something set up for that.
And then like so there'd be a lot of questions we'd have to answer. Okay. One day, I'll keep pushing for it.
yeah, because I mean, for me, like when you watch stuff on YouTube, like there's certain moments that give you like goosebumps, and it's because like the sound plays such a big part in that. Like, I mean, I'm probably one of the biggest diehard Kobe fans you'll ever meet, and like listening to the sounds of like when Kobe like baptized Dwight Howard, or like shot from behind the backboard over Harden, or like things like where people just like did not think this was possible. Like when he put up 81 points and just how electric the sound was, or when he put up 60 his last game, like that adds so much to it, like, I mean, I know people have talked about like people's reactions and stuff like that. And those are all like things I'm sure you guys will eventually get to, but yeah, sound for me seems like the obvious like next like evolution of a moment. Yeah. And I mean, props to you in terms of helping evolve the moment already, because I've been talking to several people, and one of the things I've been saying is like, look, the S3 moments, like the thumbnail like highlight combination is just leaps and bounds better than series 1. Like the thumbnails that you're putting out are all like so sick. Like night and day difference between most of the S1 thumbnails are super boring. And then just like the fact that like the angles you're considering, like the slow-mo like that's thrown in, like on the Blake Griffin one that you guys just announced, like the slow-mo of him like looking to pass and then turning and shooting, like it's just beautiful. Like it's so great.
I love to hear you say that, because it's like, yeah, we're just kind of looking for any possible thing we can do to make it a better experience. Like I give major props to the NBA like team that we work with. Like the more like I meet with the NBA every day, and we're constantly like just kind of evolving the relationship. Like now they kind of know like exactly what we're looking for, and I'm sort of really refining what it is that we're looking for as well. And they've been just a great, partner in that respect. And so I love it. Like they know the things that I just go crazy for. Like when you get a slow-mo to show like the complicated part of the play, I love to start the play in the broadcast angle to help the user sort of orient themselves to what they're about to watch. And then you start hitting them with the, closer angles. They know I love my player reactions, like almost to a fault. So it's just been great, and I'm happy to sort of hear that is being sort of like noticed. And we had fun with that. Like even going back to the playoffs last year, like when we finally got the kind of okay to start using like phantom cam footage, like I was, I was on cloud 9. I'm like, I put my director's cap on, and I'm like, can we focus on this? Can we get this reaction? And like even the Giannis block, like first things first, like when you're taking like phantom cam footage and now just taking a vertical slice of it, like it can be a bit. Phantom cam wasn't designed for our vertical format, so we kind of had to get creative in some spots and had to make some decisions. And the one that I love, that I'm happy that we kind of really like specifically like pushed on and prioritized was sticking the camera on Giannis like as long as possible for the block on like when he blocked the alley on Ayton.
Yeah.
I'm like, because at first we're like following the ball and we're like, it doesn't really like do it. And I'm like, I want to see Giannis. I want to see the moment like that he realizes it's there. Like the moment he realizes he and like only he on this planet can go
Yeah.
and stop it. Like, you know, it was just it was awesome to be able to work in that way,
Yeah.
and to really, you know, we're coming into our own. Like, the vertical format is a unique beast, and there's benefits to it, and there's like hurdles we have to, you know, figure out to that. And I feel like, you know, we're bit by bit getting better and better, and hopefully can continue to get better and better. And the thumbnails, I love the thumbnails. Like,
Dude.
you know, like as far as I'm concerned, like when you watch the video, like the video is the highlight, you know, like we have a word for that. It's a highlight, but a moment is everything. Like a moment is like, in my mind, like the second you click to reveal, and then like you see the picture like in the corner of your eye, and I feel like there's a big opportunity to sort of set the stage for the viewer, like when they click into the moment, like without audio, sometimes it's tough to necessarily convey that, you know, the mid-range jump shot you're about to see, like, it's epic because of the context of that you might not see immediately because it's not flashy. So I think with the thumbnail, we have an opportunity to sort of pick what sort of mindset we want the collector to be in, like when they go watch that moment. Like if you see like Jason Tatum pointing up like at the rafters, then, you know, like there might be more to this moment than it just being whatever, a dunk that was in the top 10 that week. Like, and it's, I think that's his first like 60-point game or something. And like, I love just game winner celebrations in the pick, so people know when they click through to the moment, they're doing so already kind of with an idea of what to expect. And I think that can sort of shape and inform how they view it for the first time. And I think first impression is sort of really a big part of that. I love watching pack openings, and watching what people
arguably
care
the best
about.
part of Top Shot.
Yeah, it is, and I live vicariously through all of you guys. Like, anybody that opens a pack, I'll watch it. I'll watch it. I'll watch to you know, see people's face, to see what people care about. You know, like see people read the description, how they read the descriptions, and stuff like that. If they read the descriptions, you know, I'm a total like nerd when it comes to, you know, just consuming our own products. So
yeah, well, I mean, and that attention to detail, I think, really shows. I think one thing also about moments with the whole thumbnail is like every time you look at your moment collection, you're not necessarily going to watch the actual moment. You're going to scroll through them, and like having that grid or just that collection of like incredible thumbnails really like pops. Like it brings it to life for sure.
It does,
yeah. It's incredible.
Spend so much more time. You spend so much more time with the thumbnails than with the video.
Yeah, you really do over time, for sure.
We're getting to a point now even where like on the radar of things that we need to be mindful of is, you know, I love to get an action shot if we can, or a picture that tells a story. But if you can't, sometimes the fallback is like a generic picture. And a lot of the generic pictures that get snapped up by like sports photographers all around the world is the dribbling like out at half court picture. You know, you get the crop, it's similar crop. And now we've had enough moments where like there's situations where you've got the same player in the same jersey, in the same pose. And I'm like, oh, this is something I have to be aware of as well. So like not every one of your pictures is like more or less, you know, similar. Which makes, you know, spicing it up in any way that we can.
Interesting.
Fun without abusing that. Like I still want people to be able to, you know, if a picture is really unique, then the moment is probably really unique.
Yeah. And you want people to be able to look at, like, when you search for a player and there's like 5 years from now, there's 30, 40 moments. You don't want them to look and be like, okay, the moment I want is one of these 4. They all look kind of the same. Like they should be super distinct and like unique to some degree, for sure. Yeah. So once again, that's good to know that you guys are being so detail oriented with that. Because I think one of the interesting things is, I know, you know, when the market's not popping off, people freak out and like start to get upset about stuff. And I think one thing that's you have to remind people is like, you guys are doing things that have never been done before. Like there's no blueprint for you to follow. You're making it as you go. And so to know that you guys are paying attention to these details, like, does matter a lot, because like right now, it really has no consequence. But 4 or 5 years from now, like that could be a really big problem. One of the series 3 moments that I was a little bummed doesn't have the action thumbnail is the Jordan Nwora block on Kevin Durant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was at the opening game that I got to see. And I actually have I should have sent it to you. I have from the suite like a video of it on my phone, and it's
Nice.
vertical too, so you know it fits already.
I love it.
Yeah, kind of going off of like what we've talked about with Series 3 and how we're seeing these improvements in the moments, and these moments are evolving. I think another evolution we're seeing with Top Shot as a whole is like you guys released a roadmap where you're kind of like, hey, like here's what to expect. Like there's gonna be this many moments, this many rares, this many legendaries per player. So you have a better idea, both as a consumer and in your case, like knowing how many moments you have to have per player. So you don't have to be like, well, that's a moment, release it. That's a moment, release it. You don't have to guess. Because I feel like with Series 2, there are definitely some rare moments that aren't common that are not as good as the common moments. And it almost seems like the common moments, it was just kind of timing where you're like, hey, we got to make some new common moments. This is his best moment between here and here. So this is a common moment. Oh, well, we have to do a rare now. Well, we already used that moment for the common, and he hasn't really done anything super special between that common release and now. So I guess we're just going to pick a generic 3 or something like that.
Yeah. That's definitely, not far from the truth. Like, and when you look at what happened in Series 2, where the product was at the beginning versus at the end of that series, and like, I mean, even I think if they had a concrete roadmap, would have just been obliterated by January.
Yeah.
Tough to sort of plan that out. But yeah, I think it was just such a weird year where everything was scaling up so fast, like the user base, but also the resources and the personnel, making things happen. So many more, people involved come the end of Series 2 than were there at the beginning of Series 2.
You being one of those people, right?
Yeah, so I joined in February.
Yeah.
Full time, and I had been freelancing prior to that. I had been freelancing since December, I think. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I was doing was identifying some historic, wish list items and writing play descriptions.
Yeah.
So then, then I kind of got more and more involved with the live operations process. Like it made sense to have, as I was sort of kind of leaning into being the voice of the play descriptions, it made sense to be more involved in the why was a moment picked? Instead of just having to, write the play description for a moment I'm just seeing for the first time. So I was very fortunate to be able to kind of see more and more of that process. And then eventually we're like, let's just do this, full time. And that's when I left Slam and I sort of moved over. Yeah. But so Series 2 was a really crazy year. And I don't even know that there would be any way to really nail that aspect of it, because so many other things were happening. Good things, obviously, it's quite a momentous year for Dapper, for Top Shot, and for all of us collectors. Yeah. But for Series 3, no doubt, night and day difference. We have the luxury and in many cases, the mandate to not just build, what's on this short-term radar, but build a whole year's worth of content. And we're doing it all the time. I'm already building throwdowns and hustle and show and MGLE and our other our player reaction set, the teamwork set. All of these sets already have plays that are flagged. We're not going to commit to anything until we need to, but I'm going to reserve stuff. And if the time comes when a moment maybe it gets bumped, they're no, this guy has one-upped himself. This, we don't need this to be his MGLE. Then that I can drop, into the base set or whatever. So I love that. It lets us do two things. It lets us be more mindful of structuring the legendaries so they're legendary for reasons more than just a small make count. Like it's a legendary moment. It was a legendary moment on the court on Twitter, and now it's a legendary moment in Top Shot. And what your description of the process in Series 2 isn't far off. So I'm super psyched about that. And in a way, I feel like knowing that we've committed to these caps, and I think these caps were like just so meticulously planned out, that gives me like license to just straight up like say no. Like if I see a play, I'm like, if I see a John Morant play, he's been coming up quite a bit lately.
He's got a couple highlights, I think.
Yeah, he's pretty good, that guy. But it gives me the mandate to just be like, no, Ja, like I don't want this to be one of our Jaws. We only have whatever X amount of John Morant moments we can use, and like let's just, we'll keep it. You never know what the future holds, but as opposed to last year where we kind of always had the plan for everything. We're like, okay, well, let's get it ready just in case, because who knows? Because in a lot of ways we're sort of figuring that out. So, man, the roadmap. I was a big fan of the roadmap.
Did you have any input on the roadmap? Like, were you asked like how many moments do you think should be made per player? Like, what will help you? Like, I'm assuming that they didn't just give it to you and say, "All right, here you go." Like, no input. But like, how much input were you allowed to have? Like, what was some of your suggestions? Just if you could walk me through that process, I feel like that would be super interesting.
Yeah. So like, Top Shot is what it is because like some really kind of like visionary systems designers, and Alan Falcon, as he's more known by on Twitter, is one of those sort of OGs that really brought it to life. So Alan, like working with our economists, like really sort of mapped out kind of like the logistics of it in terms of like how we want to structure drops, like how many legendaries should we have and when, how many rares and when, and like I'm in those meetings, but I'm kind of just like useless in those meetings. I'm just happy to defer to their approach and their way of thinking, for their expertise for those things. Like you don't want me like typing in and be like economy, like no.
It's like Austin's a volunteer firefighter, a web developer, and a moment chooser, not an economist.
Not an economist, exactly. So like I would say I was very involved in terms of picking, we know we want these to be, we know we can do this many sets. Let's really narrow down what we want those sets to be. And that's where I was able to, play around and really have fun and just like able to, push hard to bring back like Hustle and Show, because I think it's just such a fun set that really resonates with like a certain like aspect of our collectors. Talking about how we can improve throwdowns, constantly looking for improvements. And then it gave us a chance to plan out other sets. Like it's tough when you've got sets that kind of compete with one another, and in some ways, like here's an example. Like Throwdowns kind of competes with MGLE in the sense that like if like a player has a Dunk of the Year candidate like play, like that could easily be their MGLE moment, but it should also be in Throwdowns. But so there is some element of like a competition between those sets in that sense. But with Hustle and Show, there isn't. Like we can really shine a light on a part of like the NBA, a beloved part of the NBA that isn't necessarily going to be stealing content from other sets, and being able to kind of explore that further this year, which we're doing in the like player reaction. That comment set is just another way of being able to do that. So we had some great long conversations about everything from what Hollow means to our product and what we want Hollow to mean to basketball fans, to everything. So I would say very involved in terms of planning out the content in all those meetings, but happy to defer in terms of the economics to the people whose expertise that is.
Yeah, that Hustle and Show set is one of my favorites, and it was one of the kind of nice surprises of Series 2, and so much so that it was the first challenge I ever completed was the Ja Morant one. And then I ended up going back and finishing the set because I thought it was such a great, like, it highlighted these moments that like you don't necessarily see on highlight reels of a player. Like you
Yeah.
see throwdowns when you look up on YouTube, but you don't see them like the like ugly play where they put in like that hustle to make like something happen. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that that's so sick. So were there any sets in particular that you advocated for? Were there any sets in particular like you were like, no, we're not doing this again? It sounds like you were pretty adamant about the hustle and show set, which I think makes a lot of sense. I think that's such a great theme for a set. Was there anything else?
I'm kind of going through all the things that I can and kind of say, uh, uh, just advocating in some ways for like what I think we can make Hollow become in terms of this sort of almost like this event in and of itself, where it's like a big deal, like to see the players that get picked, like as the representatives of your team. I want to get to a point where people can look back at like a decade's worth of Top Shot content and be able to, by looking like through the hollows, kind of like this unofficial like Hall of Fame of players that were important to your team in that year. Like
you could even call it a Hall of Fame.
The Hall of Fame. I love it. Yeah. The ideas they write themselves. Like
yeah. That one won't cost you a lot. I'll talk to Alan later.
We talked like obviously there's the legendary like rookie exclusive set that's coming, and we had conversations where like, well, if we're giving this set dedicated completely to rookies, should we go out of our way to sort of not include rookies in Hollow in order to keep like the numbers down? But like I really didn't want to start getting to like interfering with sort of the sort of purest vision of what I think Hollow should be. If Cade Cunningham is one of the 3 most important Pistons players this year, like I want to be able to represent that like in the record book and have him like as the Hollow. So if a player is legitimately good enough to earn a spot in Hollow, like so just little things like that, because that's one of the great things about Dapper is there's people with these completely different expertises that are just like aces in their own like certain fields and that bring their own perspectives and have their own priorities, and somewhere in the middle as these forces sort of intersect with each other. Mine is to make it so that like Top Shot is as much a part of the basketball landscape as any other sort of third-party platform, whether it's like 2K or like Slam Magazine or whatever. I think we can get there. I think we've already started to really get there. And like, how can we start setting like consistent precedents that we can hit and we can improve upon, so that 5 years from now when you look back, it's not just a bunch of random stuff. Like it's a bunch of stuff that was really sort of carefully and it's like specifically designed in ways. And I think we learned a lot from like Series 2, where like we wanted to do that, but we kind of got handcuffed by other things that we didn't like account for, like players getting traded or injured and stuff like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I'm maybe one of the few people on the outside looking in that has had the opportunity to meet and talk to a lot of Top Shot employees. I met you in Vegas and got to talk to you a bit. Probably one of the few people in this space that I've met in person first before I've met online. But I've gotten to spend too many hours talking to the Top Shot economists, talking to Jacob in Milwaukee, talking to a lot of people. And I think one thing that is so interesting that you touched on is it's very clear that all these people like are very highly skilled in like what they do. And I know Dapper's motto is kind of that we hire the best. And it really shows as like looking at the individual. But the one thing that like really connects all you guys is like your passion for basketball. Like talking to, and at first I thought he was just some guy who was like a finance guy who like very smart, knew what he was doing. And we started talking basketball and he started pulling these references that I was surprised. I was like, I mean, I know that reference, but why do you know that reference? And I mean, kind of learning that Jacob's a bit of an encyclopedia with basketball. I'd assume you're the same. I know we've talked a bit, but I would assume like just with your job at this point, you're just constantly getting pounded by basketball. So you've you've become that encyclopedia, whether you want to be or not at this point. But I do think that's one thing that's so unique about Top Shot, like as a product, not just like the actual product, but the people behind it. Just a lot of people with a lot of different aspects, very sharp people. But every single person I've talked to who really has like a big say in what Top Shot becomes is incredibly passionate about basketball. And I think that's so, so cool to see. Because I think at a lot of companies, you don't necessarily get everyone on the same page and passionate about the product you're developing. Like you're going to have people where it's like just a job or it's something that they like, but they're not like super into it. But like, I mean, it seems a lot of you guys, like you work like outside of work hours. Like you watch basketball on your own time. You love to go to games, like things like that. And I think that long-term makes such a huge difference with Top Shot. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about it now and so excited to see like how the product itself evolves, but even like I said, how I was saying, the moments evolve themselves. Because I do think 5 years from now, Series 7 moments are going to be so much cooler than Series 1 moments. Like Series 1 moments are going to be like these fossils, and Series 7 moments, maybe you can step inside them and have like LeBron dunk on you by the time we get to that, you know? Yeah, I'm very, very excited to see where that goes for sure. I've heard you mention it in some of your other interviews, but you have a Froby bobblehead. You're a big fan of the Kobe Shaq era in basketball. And I'm a diehard Kobe fan. Maybe I would personally say possibly the biggest Kobe fan you'll meet. I personally think he's better than LeBron will ever be. And I've gotten into many verbal fights with both the Jacob and the Top Shot economist about that, as well as several other people. But that's another story. And then I see you have the Dear Basketball poster on your wall. I have that as well. It's not hanging up, but as you can see, it's right on the ground here. So I'm like a diehard Kobe fan. And when Kobe is eventually on Top Shot, hopefully, I mean, I will sell a kidney. I'll carry out a hit for Roham. Like whatever needs to be done, I will do to get that moment. So what in your world, without like all the economics bogging things down, because I think it's going to be a little bit before we get Kobe, like in your perfect world, like how would a Kobe Top Shot rollout happen? Not worrying about like mint counts or anything like that. Just like from your heart, like what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough one, right? Because it's just so like important to get right. It's just so special, for just many reasons, right? I mean, like I was obsessed with Kobe when I was younger. I would love to be able to eventually sort of, because so many people have similar stories. It sounds like to sort of both of ours, and to be able to really kind of do those memories, those really like cherished memories, like to do them justice. Like, we'd have to be just incredibly strategic and careful about how we did that in terms of like what we debuted and when. Like I would love to, like if we could work with like the Mama Foundation, I think like that would be really cool too.
Yeah, that's really cool.
We definitely want to be able to do something more than just being like, oh, hey, here's this guy making his debut. Like we'd want to, like polish things up and present them, more than that, just because we want to be able to, like, that's going to be just a huge moment. Like it's going to be a huge like moment for the platform, a huge moment for all the collectors. So to really kind of lean into that, just like spared like no expense or effort and just really do it up, I think would be a lot of fun. And I think there's few players that would maybe necessarily kind of warrant that sort of treatment, but I think certainly Kobe is one of those. Those players. And man, yeah, I love Kobe. Like I was like 10 years old when Kobe got drafted, the 96 class. So that's like peak like nostalgia sort of wheelhouse, right? So like I was obsessed, and I was obsessed like from day one with Kobe Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he was like I could like it's so crazy. Like the players that I just got drawn to it immediately into their careers, and Kobe for some reason I was irresistible to me in Northern Ontario, nowhere near Southern California. I'm
Yeah.
just like, this kid, like this is my favorite rookie from this class, like, and maybe it's my favorite player. You know, when you're 10, it's a big decision.
Yeah, dude,
Um,
it's a huge decision.
like so I had everything you could imagine, like Kobe posters. Like I still have a ton of like Kobe cards. Um,
Yeah.
and I was just in love with Kobe, with Froby,
Mm-hmm.
that era. And I think this says more just because of my own, you know, timeline as an adolescent. Like number 8 Kobe, I was diehard. Number 24 Kobe, I don't have the same sort of emotional attachment to as maybe people who are younger than me, that they experienced the Black Mamba when they were 12. Like I experienced Froby when I was 12. If you experienced the Black Mamba when you were 12, you might have
Yeah.
different.
And
So
that's my experience. So my first memory, I think I was like 6 or 7 when the Lakers three-peated. And that's like
okay.
my first basketball memories ever. Like growing up in Long Beach, born and raised, like it was a huge deal that the Lakers were just tearing through the NBA. Like Shaq is this, like, as big as he is, he's like even bigger of a personality. Like he's getting everyone so excited. Like everyone's, I mean, people make fun of Laker fans, and they should, for the record. They should, about being fair weathered fans, because they are. Like when the Lakers are doing good, all these celebrities are sitting in the front rows. When the Lakers don't have a star on their team and it's a bunch of rookies, those celebrities are nowhere to be found. And a lot of other people like stop talking about the Lakers and all this other stuff. But this was like peak Lakers, like probably the biggest thing since like Magic and Kareem were like dominating the league and winning championships. And so right off the bat, that was such an insanely impactful thing for me. But as I think number 24 Kobe for me was the bigger personal impact, not just because of like his work ethic and like how that really resonated with me, and I modeled my life so much after that. But so I'm part Filipino, and my grandpa immigrated from the Philippines, and not the best English speaker. Like he could speak pretty good English, but like he definitely had a broken like accent and all this stuff. But one of the things that we bonded over, is one of the few things, was basketball, and more specifically Kobe. Like, so I would, as a kid, watch Laker games with my grandpa and my dad and everyone else. But it was like one of the few things that I bonded with my grandpa, like specifically, when like we would watch. And number 24 Kobe being that very special time for sure, like just from a personal level and bonding with him. And then yeah, when Kobe retired, I was crying. I was a mess. When Kobe when Kobe was inducted, like when his jersey was retired, I was crying. And then obviously when the tragedy happened, like I was like devastated too. Like definitely had such a massive impact on me, like personally, and like just my relationships with family members, which yeah, I think he's one of those very rare people who like has gone so far beyond basketball with his legacy, because anyone can like see a story and like really like take something from it. While like not to like throw shade at LeBron, but like when you look at LeBron, it's like, yeah, I'm never going to be 6'8" and like a like freak of nature. Like, and same thing with like someone like Giannis. Like I can never be Giannis, but Kobe was someone who like seemed so human, but so completely inhuman at the same time, which is,
Yeah.
I think, so incredible. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah. I'm very very excited for when that moment comes to Top Shot, and I may or may not have a solid like three paragraphs written out to propose to Alan when I interview him. So we'll see how that goes.
I
But
love it.
so going back to kind of what we talked about before with how like moving forward, it really seems like the more like incredible plays, like the more incredible they are, it's going to correlate with the rarity now. Like the legendary plays are truly going to be legendary moments. Do you think that that will make the Top Shot debut badge a little less significant going forward? And now I know we've like Top Shot debuts won't be coming out nearly as heavily as they did in Series 1 and Series 2. Like now that the best moments are going to be the best moments and the rarest moments, do Top Shot debuts like matter less going forward in your opinion?
I don't know, like necessarily, that one would equal the other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the big sort of component of it is we burned through a lot of Top Shot debuts, like
Yeah.
in Series 1 and Series 2. They're just, and so they hold this sort of really kind of important role in not just the player's story, but in like the Top Shot story and like how the
Mm-hmm.
player's story intersects with the Top Shot story. But I think like if we're looking, 10 years down the road and you're looking back, like I think the badges will always be special because the debuts will always be special.
Mm-hmm.
But like and that's where I think you kind of can really unlock these new levels of excitement where like I want the moments like the grail moments to be grail moments because the moment, if we keep producing content for the next like decade at a similar cadence to what we're doing, like you're going to look back at players and they're going to have multiple run attacks. And like are you going to obsess over collecting the debut? Like maybe, because it's definitely special, but maybe the moment to own from that player is like that iconic moment from their career, like the moment from their career. And maybe it doesn't, maybe that moment isn't the one that gets the badge. I feel like, yeah, there will always be that sort of extra clout from it being, somebody's badge. But at the end of the day, yeah, like I like to think that, being a basketball fan is something that's like, that lived through a specific era, or you just is a crazy like basketball fan in the current era, to be able to identify and kind of seek out and collect the moments that are of the most significance, like to you.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, like I feel like that will be just as much, if not more, of a draw to a moment than the Top Shot debut badge.
Yeah.
Because like there's a lot of players that had a lot that will be in like they'll be in run it backs because they'll be a major part of the season. Basically, every season we go to for a span of like 15 years. It's hard not to like.
Yeah.
So then your job as a basketball fan will be like, okay, whatever. It's the year 2050. There's like 15 different Tim Duncan run it backs. Like, well, like the debut will be special, but then like maybe pick like the LeBron or Tim Duncan moment that.
Well, the most valuable Tim Duncan moment's the one where he shows the least amount of emotion on his face, right?
Yeah,
that's what I would assume. So.
Yeah, because if you get him cracking a smile, then it's like super legendary.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I think one great example of that is the Shaq Top Shot debut, which, I mean, people gave you a lot of flack for not picking a dunk. I thought it was really cool that you picked such a unique moment for his Top Shot debut, because how many Shaq dunks will eventually be on the platform? Like a lot, whether he's no matter what jersey he's wearing. But it's cool to see, like, I mean, that speed. I didn't know he had that speed when he was on the Heat. Like, I thought that was just magic Shaq. Because, I mean, you see it a couple times on the Lakers on some of his highlight reels. And I remember it growing up. But even then, like when he was on the Lakers, he was just known as just this unstoppable force. But I mean, it is a good example of where like Shaq's Top Shot debut, I don't think is going to be his most valuable moment, like even necessarily short term. As soon as you get a Lakers Shaq, as soon as you get a Magic Shaq, I think people gravitate towards that more, even if the mint counts a little higher. Give me a Lakers Shaq all day over a Heat Shaq. And I mean, as a Lakers fan, like, do I really want a Heat Shaq? Like after he like that whole issue with Kobe and him leaving and all that stuff, like the Heat Shaq is like almost like a it's like a thorn in the side still, where it's a little, it hurts a little still.
I think with with the Shaq example, I think he described it perfectly. At the end of the day, when we look back at all the different like Shaq moments like that could be on the platform, like you're gonna get those, crazy power dunks. You're gonna get, I would hope, like this isn't breaking news, but I would love to get like a moment of Shaq like ripping the stanchion down or breaking a backboard or whatever we could get.
Yeah.
Because that was obviously such a big, part of who Shaq is, who Shaq was. We committed to the year 2005-06 for some very, very solid reasons that we're very excited to do. And a reality of that is Shaq was on the Heat at that year. And we've got alignment like internally and with the NBA that when we visit a year, like we're going to tell the story of that year. Like we're not going to really like put our thumb on the scale too much, like to move players around. So being able to take Miami Heat Shaq, who was like in a vacuum, an incredible player and an incredible like part of an incredible team.
Yeah.
Like we were excited to be able to, kind of give him his flowers at that point in his career. And the dunking is a big part of Shaq, but like almost as memorable about Shaq, at least I think like for people who really kind of grew up with Shaq and watched Shaq was that mobility, that athleticism, obviously on display in Orlando, less so in LA and less so in Miami. But he still had it. And the funnest part about Shaq is he would still try it. Like that love for the game, that like sense of humor. Like Shaq was always like trying to play point at the All-Star games. Like that was just part of his, his like fun-loving spirit. So the play that we ended up going with for the running back Shaq, I love because it shows, I mean, this monster blocking a shot, then showing off the mobility, and then kind of goofing around on his way back down the court. I feel like, like that, like that's the sort of snapshot that I'm happy for us to be able to elevate to a rare.
Well, and then there's a dunk in the archive set. If you really need a Shaq dunk, like it's there.
Yeah.
And like you said, there will be many more Shaq dunks to come. I do think it's interesting that people like complained about that, because I was like, no, like this, if you're someone who values that Top Shot debut badge, like that's your gold standard. Austin just did you a favor because he made this moment very special. Like if it was just a dunk, that for sure a Lakers dunk, a Magic dunk is going to be worth way more than this in the future. But because it is such a unique thing that you're not going to see on the, maybe you see it one or two more times over 20 years of run it backs. Like there's not tons of moments where Shaq went coast to coast. And even then, the most like one of his most famous Lakers coast to coast is an assist to Kobe. It's not him finishing. So yeah, I mean, I thought that was super cool. And I thought with the run it back and the archive moments, there was an incredible selection of both players and moments and thumbnails as we've discussed. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about, I know you've talked to some people about the run it back, but I feel like no one's talked to you about the archive set. You didn't make a video going through the plays with Jacob. Like no one's asked questions about it. And that's one of the things that fascinates me the most, not just because like the run it back, almost all of them are huge name players. Like anyone who is a basketball fan in 2005, 2006 can run through that list and should know every single one. Even the ones who are a little more obscure, like Karen Butler, who Rashard Lewis, who like really like was on a lot of people's radar once he went to the Magic and was with that Dwight team that made it to the finals. Like most people know every player in that rare set, but in the archive set, there's so many gems in there. And it blows my mind that people aren't talking about it more, or that people aren't like interested in it more. One of the things for me is like the Zebo Top Shot debut. And I'm not the biggest Zach Randolph fan, but like in his time, he was such a monster. He was such a physical presence. Like with those Grizzly teams, he was known as like one of the toughest players in the NBA, who is not afraid to like get down and dirty, like throw his weight around, like bump you on defense. Like I like, just as an outside guy looking in, who is a Lakers fan and rooting for the Lakers, like Zebo was one of those players that I felt like I was just drawn to be a fan of, because how he put his heart into the game. Kyle Korver Top Shot debut, like before you have Curry, like you have Kyle Korver, and I mean, I know you have Ray Allen and Larry Bird and other people too. Like Kyle Korver isn't the first like great shooter of all time, but I mean, once again, like Lakers playing the Jazz like in those playoffs, and Kyle Korver just like, he's coming, he's taking the shot, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you're just pissed when he either wins the game or ties it late in the game, and Kobe has to do something. Like those, Darren Williams, another one. Like I could go down the list of players that like maybe have kind of faded from like the spotlight, but during that time were such a big part of those teams. And I think Kyle Korver even is such a good example, because he just did that podcast with JJ Redick and was talking about playing with Allen Iverson and being on the 76ers, and how his role was way different than a lot of like players with his skill set was at that time, which I think just adds even more context to why a Kyle Korver Top Shot debut as a 76er is like a really, really cool thing to have.
Right. Yeah, the archive set was really awesome in a lot of ways. Like, and it kind of was a precursor, I guess, to the Series 3, like full commitment to, like the craziest plays are going to be in the legendaries and rares, and the slightly more accessible will be the other plays will be in the common set, more accessible to everybody. So you kind of saw that tiering system, I guess, at least in situations where a player appeared in both. I feel like the archive set gave us an opportunity to, cast a wider net, like a casual fan at the time that like you said, they'll know most of the names in the run it back, if not all of the names. But I love the archive set as our place to do those deep dives, because not everything will stands the test of time. Like a Stromile Swift dunk isn't iconic in 2021. I get that, but Stromile Swift as just throwing down crazy dunks was just a fun small part of the basketball landscape that year. And I think the introduction of the archive set lets us include those. And it's nothing more than a small part of a big set that covers, much larger mint counts, but also even multiple years. So I think that's something we can never put that in a rare. There's some players that make it in the archive that just wouldn't work and run it back. And we understand, when someone is queuing up for a rare pack, maybe you don't want to pull Stromile Swift from your rare pack. I get that. I'm sensitive to that. But if I don't know, I love it. I was obsessed with the league then. I've always been obsessed with the league. And the way I look at it is the inclusion of players like Korver and Stromile Swift, not that those two are necessarily on the same level.
Definitely not.
But it's here's what it can be. It can be a nice little treat for fans who are just as obsessed about the league in 0506 and knew more than the 50 most popular players. Mm-hmm. It can be a treat for them, or it can be a learning opportunity for somebody else. I'm not gonna make everybody be study every play we put into the archive set if it doesn't resonate with you. But I think it's just so exciting that Top Shot can be kind of a guided tour through history. And if you want the Coles notes, stick to run it back. But if you want to get down and dirty, let's talk about Stromile Swift.
I mean that's the position I was in. I didn't know who, as tapped into the NBA as I was during that time, I did not know who Stromile Swift was. And I think there's one or two other names in there. I had no idea who they were. Right. Meanwhile, someone like a Michael Redd, who's in the rare, maybe the casual basketball fan doesn't remember him and he's been kind of lost in time. But I remember Michael Redd, during that time being a good player and someone that people like talked about. Yeah, and I think that part's so cool. I think honestly, a great example of it. And I think different people will have different examples of this in the archive set based on like what team they grew up rooting for and watching. But for me, it's the Luke Walton Top Shot debut. Like Luke Walton is not an exciting player. And I mean, nowadays, like there's a lot of like newer fans who probably think of him as like a coach who was on the Warriors or now the Kings, not this player who like weirdly wasn't the best, but like was an incredible passer, but like defense is kind of new. Like, oh, he's going to pass first, but like he has some incredible plays that I still remember to this day without having to look up a Luke Walton highlight reel because like he was such a pass first, like off the bench spark plug sometimes that like would set up Kobe or Lamar Odom for some of their best like shots because he knew where to give it to them and when to give it to them. And so having that Luke Walton Top Shot debut, it probably will never be really worth anything, but that's not like every moment, like the money shouldn't be the driving force behind owning it necessarily. And like having a Luke Walton is kind of cool. Like, I'm not showing it off to my friends maybe, but like it gives you that like completionist like feeling almost. We're like, I've got a piece of this and I got a piece of that. To continue on this path of the archive set, which I'm a huge fan of. I've been scooping them up because I think they're a little cheap right now. And I want to that's one of the sets I definitely want to complete. I noticed you are responsible for giving Smush Parker a moment. And now Smush Parker is someone that Kobe has been quoted saying never belonged in the NBA. He said he was a walk-on that they signed and they didn't want to give real money to get a real point guard. So I kind of want to pick your brain here. Like what made you be like, Smush Parker is the one we got to throw up there? Was there just a little irony behind it, like a little trolling? Because like, I mean, he is like very infamous in his own weird way, like especially for us Laker fans.
I'm very aware of the history of Smush Parker and the Lakers. And like here's what I'll say. Like Smush Parker was started in a backcourt, shared a backcourt with Kobe, like during a very interesting time of Kobe's career for 2 seasons. He started like he wasn't just like a rotation piece.
He also wasn't allowed to talk to Kobe during practice. So
the Lakers were at a point in their history where they needed to have like Smush Parker starting. They just that's the best for whatever reason. That's the best that they had. And that's Smush Kobe beef is so infamous. I always felt bad for Smush because that was like peak like heel turn Kobe too. Like you could have put like the nicest like person in the world in that background, and they would, if the Lakers weren't winning games, they just would have been just ripped to shreds. And Smush Parker sort of like absorbed that Kobe intensity for all of us.
Yeah, he was a scapegoat for sure.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Then he became Kwame Brown later on. We're just losing our minds about him.
Yeah. So and I mean Smush Parker could throw it down too. Like there were a couple of
I mean, the moment you picked, to your credit, that is a great moment. That is not how I remember Smush Parker. And when I saw that, I was like, oh wow. Like that, I do not remember Smush Parker having any athletic ability just because he is such like a disdain in my memory. Like
and I think as proper record keepers of history, we need to see through the bias. We need to tell it as it is. And I'm not saying this is a particularly memorable or great, chapter in Lakers history, but at that given juncture in time, history is history.
I mean, it was a very historical time in Lakers history for different reasons, because I mean, you had Kobe putting up insane stats just to try and win the game because the team was so bad. Because he's like, I can't really depend on Smush Parker to put up even 10 points. So I guess I got to go to drop 50. And I mean, like, there's a part of me as a Laker fan and as a dire Kobe fan where it like really sucks that like Kobe's best years were like lost to that, where like he should have more MVPs. He should be like have more. No, he should have dominated that era, and he did stats wise, but it's not reflected with necessarily with championships.
Right.
But I mean, at the same time, maybe we don't get that heel turn Kobe that transformed into the Black Mamba and the Mamba mentality. And I mean, it's what made that 2008, 2009, 2010 finals runs that much more memorable, because he did come back from such an incredible low.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah, man, it's a fascinating story. And I think you're right. You don't get to that like final chapter of Kobe, like the wisdom Kobe, without that intense chapter in his career. In a lot of ways, I feel like we owe a lot of appreciation to Smush Parker as the first responders to like the Chernobyl incident. Like hold on, like let's give Smush his flowers while we can. Oh, because he did a lot for us. But
oh, that's definitely one way to look at it. Another thing that Smush did for us, and I feel like you have to be aware of this, but if you're not, I'm very excited to introduce you to it, is he brought the Smushgalade to life. Do you know what the Smushgalade is?
no.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so after we do this, I'll send you a video and you'll have to watch it in the near future. But Smush Parker has a video where he's showing off his car, and he bought an Escalade,
Right.
and he calls it the Smushgalade. And he had them take off Escalade on the back and replace it with Smushgalade.
Right,
And
as one does.
It's one of, as you know, as a starting point guard on the Lakers does. Like that's not it's a big shoes to fill. Like can't just be anybody like walking off the street. But yeah, it's one of the most incredible videos I've ever seen. He uses the term smushderize at one point.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it'll only add to your appreciation for Smush Parker.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear what you have to say about that later on.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, and I think honestly, even I think just having being able to include these points of in some cases contention and have them represented in the product is fun, because I've had more conversations about Smush Parker than I've had about most of the players in the NFL. It's gotten people talking. The highlight, no one can argue that the highlight is
highlight
worthy of
is incredible.
This fun. And like it or hate it, that was a reality in 0506 for Lakers fans. And it is painfully retrenched and put back in front of them, 15 years later. So.
Yeah, well, when the Kwame Brown moment hits the archive set in the future, if you could just give me a week's notice so I can mentally prepare for that, having to look at that on Top Shot, that'd be great.
Now, what would we debut? Lakers Kwame, or would we debut Washington Wizards playing one-on-one with Michael Jordan? Kwame,
hopefully Washington Wizards. That would be incredible.
Yeah.
The stories poor Kwame is had to endure is hilarious, but also you do kind of feel bad for the guy.
You do. And no, it's so fun to be able to just sort of deep dive and really tell any individual player's story. And because we think back on how players were represented in the media, whether it's Kwame or Smush or Andrew Bynum, if any one of those guys you focus in on them, they've got this fascinating story, and I just love it. I love it.
And I think that's kind of how you touched on earlier, but I think that's the coolest part about this archive set. I know a lot of people are just there are too many moments for this player, and you're not giving us bottlenecks, but and people are upset about that. But you get to explore so much more of that year as a result. And I mean, there's so many Lakers players that I can name that a lot of people who aren't Lakers fans and didn't grow up may not like know that name. Like Andrew Bynum, even like he had a couple years where he was like considered super, super good, but like there's like Sasha Vujacic, there's like I'm trying to think. Shannon Brown. Shannon Brown was incredible for like a couple years, like has some incredible highlights. And that's someone who for sure would get like completely lost in like time. But like that one block that Shannon Brown has where he chases someone down and pins it against the backboard and like brings it in, like that belongs in, well, if you put it in a run it back rare, I think people would be really upset that they got a Shannon Brown, but that belongs in the archive set, like in the future.
That's what it's there for, you know. There's a lot of fun players where
and there will be players like that and on every team that I'm not aware of that I'll get to learn about, which I think is really, really cool too.
Yeah, I think that's the big part. Like it's just people being receptive to learning why. And I think part of that comes down to us having like an obligation and responsibility to not make moments without a reason. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's sort of been kind of at the top of my, strategy list, is to really make sure like any moment, and not every moment is going to be the most memorable play of the decade, but like if you don't immediately know, like I don't want people to say, well, Top Shot like doesn't know what they're doing, like because that just won't be true. Like I want people to be like, okay, I don't get this. Like, why is this? Like maybe it's a gap that I have that I can learn. Like you don't have to. Like you can just sell it and move on if that's the type of collector you are. Like that's fine too. There's no right or wrong way. But like like I came from Slam before here. Nobody like really like questioned the cover. Like if they didn't really know the player that was on the cover, they'd be like, "Oh, I should probably read about this player." Like no, it's just like Slam just picks random people to be on the front of their magazine. What are they doing? Like, why didn't they try to not do that? Like,
why didn't they only make 999 of these magazines? Why can't just everyone buy one? I don't get it.
It's So I mean, it comes down to at the end of the day us really holding ourselves to the highest possible standard of picking why a player is there, whether it's the play or the context. Or, there's a number of things that sort of play into that. But and doing it time and time again, so that people can really, that sort of trust that we're doing things for a reason is established.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that in real time was the Bucks playoff moments. Like I know you guys got some flack for putting out too many moments, et cetera, but I think regardless of what people think about that set, I think especially if you look at the Suns moments and you look at the Bucks moments, they do such an incredible job of telling that team's story like through the playoffs. I'm someone who collected some of the Suns moments, or a lot of the Suns moments, and was doing the Suns challenges, not as a Suns fan, but I just was kind of like, I felt like they were going to win. And I liked the moments. I liked the players. I was like, oh, Chris Paul, Hall of Famer, Devin Booker, one of my favorite players in the NBA, strong connection to Kobe, one of the big reasons why. And then they got to the finals and the Bucks ended up on the other side. And obviously I was following it. I think I had some like Bucks common moments, maybe. I don't think I may had one or two playoff moments, but I ended up funny enough, it was when the Suns went up 2-0, I went and bought all the Bucks playoff moments because in my head, it kind of clicked that like, you know what, like just like the story is being told with the Suns, the same thing is happening with the Bucks. And I mean, part of it too was I was like, oh, there's going to be a challenge, and having these moments, I'll get that final chapter. And that way, whoever wins, I have the final chapter I want, which is the winner.
Right.
And I think you guys did such an incredible job with all those moments, even though like, oh, some people are complaining that, oh, why does Giannis have like multiple moments, or why does Middleton have like multiple moments or something like that? Where are all the Jordan Nwora moments, but,
of course. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was so cool. And to see that in real time was incredible. And at the time, even when the Giannis reward came out, which is arguably my favorite moment on Top Shot, mostly because that thumbnail. That thumbnail,
Right.
it's the only thumbnail with him with the trophy. There's so much emotion and context attached to that, even with like the challenge Kobe gave him. So that really resonated with me. Like watching, I mean, when he won, there were tears pouring down my face along with Giannis. Like I couldn't hold back. Like
Right.
it was incredible. And like at the time, people didn't really value that moment. And we've seen since that, hey, like, you know what? Maybe Austin kind of knew what he was doing, because that moment goes for a lot more now, because people want that moment. And I think that we'll hopefully continue to see that with these archive sets, like where you're telling the whole story, like you're saying. And that includes, you know, the players who like were a key player then, maybe not so much like
Right.
later on. Like, are we going to remember Bobby Portis 10 years from now? You know what? If you're not a Bucks fan, maybe not. But
Right.
he played such an integral part, not just on the stat sheet, even. Same thing with PJ Tucker, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I think you guys did such an incredible job with that. And I mean, that's why I've kept both the Suns set and the Bucks set, even though like the Suns didn't win. I was like, you know what? This is like really a part of the story, and having these two together is like so incredible.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I think that it's just it goes to show like how, you know, valuable it can be to sort of live through this together. Like Dapper, like Top Shot collectors, like basketball fans everywhere. As we sort of progress through the journey, we're doing it together. And when the, you know, moments kind of get presented in a like somewhat a chronological way, like a canonical way, at least like that.
Yeah.
It really, I think, it really kind of helps you like time travel back to that moment and watch this. It progresses. So
yeah. And I think,
as opposed to us just throwing like random moments at you at any given time and be like, remember this? Like, well, no, that was 3 months ago, and I didn't watch that game. But so obviously playoffs were a very easy time to do that. It wouldn't have made sense any other way. But to be able to do that here in Series 3 as well, like the plays that we were obsessed with, like during the first week of the season, are kind of already in the product if they're not saved for future use. And just sort of advance through it, and we're all kind of advancing through it together is just a big, I think, a big benefit.
Yeah. And I do think it's cool that some of those, like, I mean, I keep going back to the Blake Griffin one and the Jordan Nwora moments in particular, because I mean, those were two of the big ones that stood out to me. And the Giannis one's incredible too. But I do think it's really cool that, like, yeah, even though you're saving like the best moments for like the rares and legendaries, the moments that have already come out in Series 3 are like so incredible. Like a lot of them, like that Nwora block. I don't know, maybe it's because I was at the game and there's like that emotional attachment to it. But like, just I feel like even in a vacuum, like Nwora blocking Kevin Durant is kind of crazy, and to like have that in a moment is like a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, like I agree, and it's interesting. Like when you think about it, like to an extent, like when we release something to come into the base set, we're kind of committing to something more or less. And for a player like Jordan Nwora, who's, you know, barring maybe some unexpected developments, probably not going to get an MGLE, probably not going to get a holo. Like so, in that way, we can be like, you know, like Jordan Nwora's like most like epic moment can be in the base set, like unless it fits, you know, another thematic set, like whatever, Hustle and Show or the celebration set. So that's one of the dynamics at play here is like when we look at a play from Jordan Nwora, we can be like, yeah, this might be the most memorable play of the season. Like, let's get this into the product because, like, you know, we have justification to use it now. Whereas somebody with Giannis, and I love the Giannis play. That's one that the community was really in love with, and that
I cannot believe that's a common moment.
Yeah, well, you know, it's like who knows? We'll see. Like when the dust settles, whether it was the right call or not. But I'm like, okay, is this moment good enough to be a Giannis moment? And like check the box. Like, yep, yeah, it's pretty good. Like, is it so good that we need to, you know, save it for Holo, save it for MGLE, and that's where I kind of had to make that commitment where I'm like, Like, I think Giannis, like, I don't think we're going to need this for his hollow and his MGLE. So I'm going to make the like declaration that this is like kind of like one of Giannis's, top five, but not top two plays.
Yeah.
Which is a tough, thing to hit. And there's going to be situations where we miss and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But it's a fun puzzle to try and solve, is, find that sweet spot for every moment. So,
Yeah.
and I'm happy that you're a fan of the moments. I think certainly the floor of like the quality of the play, like the floor is just so much higher. And
Yeah.
that's, just a product of, a year of learnings, the opportunity to really, tackle the season from opening day, like mindful of the whole year, and the caps put in place in the roadmap. I think they all sort of contribute to that. So
Yeah. No, I mean, I think a good example is like, I mean, yeah, people talk a lot about Series 1, but they never talk about moments that don't have a Top Shot debut badge because,
right,
the moments in Series 1 are super hit and miss. Like, there are some really good ones, there are some very mediocre ones as well. And
right,
I do feel like you said, the floor is so much higher than it ever has been with Series 3, where that Giannis moment, that Noir moment, that Griffin moment, those are considered like just common. They're not
right.
supposed to be like super, super special, hard to get. And I mean, as a casual basketball fan who's maybe checking out Top Shot for the first time, I feel like that's how you guys bring in new users is having a moment that costs like $1, $2, $3. That's a Giannis moment where it's him on four people throwing it off the backboard and dunking it. Like if you're a basketball fan, like who doesn't want that? And the fact that
Yeah,
you can start a collection and take that first step and not have to drop $1,000, which you may not have just ready to burn. Like there's a
right.
lot of people that are not in that position. And I do think that's really, really cool. And something that I'm really excited about is seeing these like common moments being so meticulously picked, but them also being accessible for new or casual users or just like users who like maybe like they like Top Shot, but they don't have the resources or they don't want to put the resources towards Top Shot. And I
Yeah,
think all those people are really important in the community.
yeah.
I don't think you have to drop thousands of dollars in order to have a voice or to contribute to Top Shot. And I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like we can offer something for everyone, like regardless of how you're approaching it as a collector, as somebody who's trying to, like chase your grail moments and hold on to them, and and by being able to take this approach to the like base set, we
Mhm.
can still sort of take a similar but in many ways different approach to the rares and legendaries, where like what, like you know not everybody trying to make a lot of money flipping packs or whatever. Like you might not want to chase the base set to do that, but like like if you like if the idea of like holding on to something valuable and really holding it like for a long time, I think it's equally important for us to be like, what, how can we make legendaries and rares like be that for these collectors? Like we can do
Mhm.
both. Like in some ways we're like trying to like at the same time have like the packs of basketball cards used to like rip at corner stores when we were kids,
Yeah.
while also being like Board 8 Yacht Club for people with like a lot of money to like and like to mess around with stuff like this in this
Yeah.
crazy new world we live in. Like there's both, and it's happening at the same time. And I think as long as we're just careful and strategic and always receptive, I think that there's ways where we can sort of scratch every itch at the same time. And I think that the separation of the tiers and the different sets kind of gives us a good path towards getting there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good way to put it because I think there's a lot of people who like look at other NFTs and they're like, "Well, why isn't like Top Shot mooning and stuff?" And it's like, well, it's because the goal of Top Shot is to be accessible to everyone. So it's not like these other NFTs where their whole goal is to keep as few people in it as possible.
Right.
Like it's like there are opportunities for that with certain moments, like you said, but they like everyone should have a chance to collect moments and participate and like have access to certain levels of utility as that's rolled out by you guys as well, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think we can end it there. I know it's late there and you've had a long day, and I mean I feel bad for already keeping you this long. So I mean, thank you so much for sticking in there and talking to me about, because I could talk about this stuff for forever, and I know you can too.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely have to do this again. I do have a lot of questions I still want to ask you. We didn't even get to talk about the WNBA, and I know you're very passionate about that and have a lot of really cool insight with the WNBA and Top Shot. And there's other stuff I'm sure that'll come up, but yeah, just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. I had a really great time talking about this stuff, and I really hope everyone watching hopefully gets a little more insight into like you and just like Top Shot and kind of the roadmap that they've put out on the blog, and just kind of the thought process that you guys are entering this series in, as opposed to series 2 and series 1.
Man, I love it. Thanks so much for having me. Like you said, could talk about this, for hours and hours. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm just so psyched about where we're at in series 3 and where we can keep going. And I think a big part of that is by being so receptive to watching all our great content creators, and even just paying attention to the community on Discord and on Twitter. So I love it. I think series 3 can just be so special, and I encourage anybody to just interact as often as possible, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to build something epic for the community, for the collectors, all the collectors of all kinds. So thanks for letting me chat hoops for
no, it's great. And I have a couple ideas for some content I want to do on my end that I would love to include you in if you're game. So hopefully people have that to look forward to. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So thanks everyone for watching. If you're new to the channel, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or there's something you think I missed, feel free to leave a comment below. Hopefully this isn't the last time with Austin. Hopefully this is the first of many. And I'm sure he'll be more than willing to answer them. Austin is super accessible on Twitter. And if you see any moments that you think he missed, please feel free to send them his way. I know he'll appreciate it. Just use that hashtag NBA Top Shot this. So yeah, thanks once again, Austin. And thank you everyone for taking the time to watch. Please clap.